My name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists nurse practitioners with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about terminating a contract. So let's say the NP is interested in a new position, or perhaps it's just unhappy where they are. If I'm reviewing the contract with the nurse practitioner, there's a set of things that we usually go through and talk about prior to them submitting their letter of resignation. So I thought it'd be helpful if we can kind of go over that in this video. So the first thing is without cause termination. 9 times out of 10, a contract's going to terminate because the nurse practitioner is ready to leave. Very rare where an employer would terminate the contract either for or without cause. It just doesn't happen very often. So you need to look into how much notice you have to provide. For the most part, 60 or 90 days are the industry standard amounts. So you would write a letter that just says, per the agreement, give me 60 days notice, and then you'd work out those 60 days, and then you're free to leave after that. At the back of the contract, there should be a section that's called notice or notices, and it'll say specifically how you can provide effective notice. Normally, personally delivering it, sending it certified, we kind of get that 60-day clock started. Just verbally telling your boss, sending an email generally is not accepted. But look at the section, see, you're making certain that you're providing effective notice. Next would be kind of restrictive covenants. So non-compete, non-solicit. You need to look how long the non-compete is for. What's the geographic limitation? So is it 5 miles? Is it 10 miles? Is it from your primary office? Is it from any office where you've worked at? Is it from any office the employer owns? And then for nurse practitioners especially, the scope of the restriction is very important. So let's say you're just an FNP, you're doing primary care at a clinic. You don't want the scope to be you can't work as a nurse practitioner because you're kind of out of options. What you want to do is limit it to what you're doing for the employer. So if you are doing primary care, then you still could do urgent care, you could be a hospitalist, you could do ED, like you just want options. So if you don't want to move and you just want to get through let's say it's a 1-year restriction, limiting it to the specific thing you're doing for the employer is very important. And so the same could be if you're working, I don't know, in a cardiology clinic or ortho or whatever. You just want it to be that specific thing so that when the kind of 1-year non-compete starts, you have options and you don't have to necessarily move. Next would be malpractice insurance. So if you have a claims made policy, who pays for tail insurance? Generally, tail insurance is about twice what your annual premium is. Malpractice insurance for NPs, for the most part, is reasonable. Somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 would be kind of an ordinary amount. To get the tail cost, you just double it. So, if you had a $1,500 annual premium, you'd pay a $3,000 tail. That's a one-time payment, but you need to be secured before your last day of employment. So that's something to think about and budget for if that's something that you need to pay. I guess next would be kind of if you're in a state where you have a collaborator or supervising physician, you need to discuss with them how to wind it down. That should be relatively easy, but there usually is some follow-up with the board. So take that into account and make sure that the proper forms have been sent to the board after the relationship ends. And then finally, do you have any repayment obligations? So if you're provided with a signing bonus, relocation assistance, normally you have to work for the employer for a period of time, or you may have to pay some back. So let's just say you were given a $10,000 signing bonus. Each year you're there, maybe half is forgiven. So if you left in year 2, you'd owe half of it back. So something to think about. One thing to keep in mind is if you have a $10,000 signing bonus, you're not getting $10,000. You're getting $6,000. But when you have to pay it back to the employer, they want the gross amount, not the net amount. So you have to pay back $10,000. So something to think about and budget for. You'll be able to get that money back in the next year. You'd have to work that out with your accountant. Kind of a pain in the butt, but just something to think about if you're going to leave. And then finally, compensation. So if you're being paid on collections, and this is really only if you're being paid on net collections, the amount of time that you get the trailing collections is important. So let me give an example because that may not make sense. So let's say you're paid 35% of net collections, and the contract states you will receive no more compensation after the contract ends. Well, any collections that come in after your date of termination, you're not going to get. So you always want, I would say, a minimum of 90 days of trailing collections. So now this would be something you would, obviously try to negotiate in advance, but something to think about because this can be a shock to some people where, they're expecting to get that 35% for everything that comes in after they leave, and there could be language in the contract that says, no, you're not getting any of it. It certainly isn't fair, but it's not uncommon to see that in nurse practitioner contracts. So that's about it on how to terminate a contract or things to think about. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact me. I'll put all my contact info in the description below the video, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks. Bye.